Boa tarde, senhoras e senhoras. Infelizmente, meu português é limitado, por isso vou continuar em inglês. Mas eu tenho certeza que você vai oferecer uma excelente tradição. First of all, I would like to congratulate the University of Sao Paulo with its 30th anniversary of its library system. And I thank you for the honor to invite me to be here and able to address you. These are the three items I would like to talk about: access to information, information literacy, and being disabled in the knowledge society. I'm not an expert in the last field, but after Mara's inspiring speech, I know a lot more, and I realize that in my work, I also don't realize always to take care of those problems, although personally I have a hearing problem. Okay, to survive, relax, develop, etc., people, organizations, and nations need knowledge on themselves, knowledge on their physical environment, and knowledge on their social environment. Where do they get that knowledge from? That cut from their information space, and I see three processes by which that goes. Observation refers to the ability to look around and observe objects and processes. This is fact-finding by experimenting and authenticating. If I want to know it's raining, so I have to take an umbrella, I look out of the window and make a decision. Conversation refers to the process in which we ask other people, family, friends, colleagues, experts, for the information we need, face-to-face, by phone, by email. So if I want to know if I have to take an umbrella, I can call my sister and ask her. She can look out of the window and decide, but maybe she's even better informed than I, because she has heard the weather report. Consultation refers to the process in which we consult information professionals working in libraries, archives, museums, information institutes, information departments in organizations. This is called stored information or recorded information. And due to the technology push and users' demands, long existing walls between traditions between them are disappearing, and we call them now mostly memory institutions. All three processes take place in the real world, and which we can touch, and the virtual world that we can access only with digital technology. Each of us has a personal information space when we can find the relevant information resources. It's created automatically when we are born, and it develops and expands during our lifetime when we grow older, our learning and working career, our social contacts, and so on. When we grow very old, the information space will shrink again. Information needs depend from person to person on their personal characteristics, the social role, the environment. And we can read this straight from two sides. From without the personal information needs, but also from the other side, the information needs, the environment needs information to be able to develop. Although there are barriers to these information resources: economic, political, affective, cognitive, and since today, personal characteristics. The economic barrier refers to the fact that people are dependent on the production and the distribution of scarce resources, including food, clothing, and housing. And since the 1970s, information is considered as the fourth production factor, which functions as a driving force to the economy. This means that supply and demand factors are applicable to the production, use and control of information, and the technical and social infrastructure that is needed for access to information and dissemination. Information costs money. As wealth is unevenly spread, the access to information is spread unevenly as well. The political barrier refers to the people's need to protect themselves against physical constraints and aggression of others. To obtain this protection, a regulation of violence is needed, whereby specialists can enforce power entitled to them through legislation. Hereby, the law and order of a society is formally stipulated. These rules have reference to all relations people have with each other. Laws regarding information, for example, the regulation of authors' rights, legislation on archives, access to government information, and freedom of the press. And Brandon has spoken a great deal about these aspects this morning. And think about nations that try to block the access to internet and WikiLeaks. The affective barrier refers to the fact that people have feeling for one another. People need one another for affection, love and support. These friendships and emotional relations are not only limited to the other people, but also include objects and organizations that are appropriate to a person's culture. Therefore, information sources and channels, such as books, CDs, DVDs, television, internet, are also included. This liking has reference to not only the information media and channels, but also to the information itself. The cognitive barrier refers to the fact that people are dependent on one another because they learn from one another. People create knowledge and distribute this between each other in the form of information. And also the development of writing. People communicated mainly through speech and verbal communication. Writing and printing made it possible for information to be disseminated in spite of borders and space and time. Also mentioned this morning. The scope and content. Learning from one another happens in diverse ways and is not limited to educational schools. The scope and content of what is taught to the people depend on the social position and social relations. An illiterate farm worker in the 18th century was not as affected by his illiteracy as an illiterate person in the first decade of the 21st century in the Western societies. The personal characteristics barrier refers to the fact that people are of equal value but are not equal. They differ in gender, length, social environment, and so on. And which is relevant for the theme of this consensus, they differ in abilities. And in some cases, and the difference are significant big, we speak of disabilities. And I come to that later. As for the cognitive barrier, those who are better than others capable to satisfy their information needs in an effective and efficient way are more capable to survive and develop themselves than those with less advantageous traits. And after Charles Darwin, it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the most responsive to change. And therefore, we need to be information literate, because we are living in times for enormous accelerating of change. If we look at the long-term development over the ages, I see three processes which I call the informatization process. First, an ongoing control over natural forces, which I call technicization. An ongoing social and technical differentiation. In social differentiation, just think about the types of libraries. Just think about the different activities within a library. And as for the technical differentiation, if it just thinks of the computer-like devices, we have desktops, we have notebook, we have netbook, we have cell phone, we have iTop. And the third process is the expanding of interdependency networks, globalization. Many items we have, we don't know where they are made, where they are used, and it's hardly unthinkable that we just live in an environment where we made all the products ourselves. What are the effects of those three processes for people? First, an exponential growth of information, information media, information channels, and information services. A growth of technology, tools, and applications to retrieve, process, and disseminate information. Changes in communication patterns and behavior. Think on Twitter, think on Facebook, think on all those things. And changes in being able to connect others 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So this newest development in this process, in the start of this 21st century, is working in the cloud. But in how many clouds are we working? Are there different clouds for work, for entertainment? And how reliable is the thing? What we see is that no longer do we carry our information with ourselves. But since that first rocks with prints on it have always been done, printed on CD, on DVD, on a stick. The only thing we need is some device, from cell phone to tablet, electricity, and a subscription to a divider. But all of that needs money. Information literacy, that it's the cognitive aspect which is relevant for us. The increased complexity of the environment leads to the need for more skills to select, retrieve, and process information. External factors create backlog. It's not something that grows from ourselves. As for the definition of information literacy, most of you will recognize this. Information literacy is a set of abilities requiring individuals to recognize when information is needed and have the ability to locate, evaluate, and use effectively to needed information. There are many more of these definitions, but basically it's about this. After this definition from the American Library Association, there was in 2003, on the auspicion of UNESCO, the Prague Declaration towards the information literate society that makes a connection to that information society. In 2005, the Alexandria Declaration beacons of the information society that make the connection to lifelong learning. And at the moment, we are working at UNESCO IFLA recommendation for media and information literacy. UNESCO can ask member states to report on items for which UNESCO developed a recommendation. I've drafted the first versions and it's now under revision, and we hope it will be realized next year. When we speak about information literacy, I see these aspects: recognition of an information need, the translation of your information need in a query, identifying suitable information sources, application of knowledge of relevant ICT, and ICT is not always a computer. Paper and pencil is ook ICT. Selection, integration, dissemination of found information, and continuous evaluation. And I think that continuous evaluation is a very important thing. Next to many definitions, there are also many modules. I developed this one many years ago. It shows how a person comes from knowledge moment K, realize he needs more information, comes to knowledge point exit. It has knowledge products and evaluation moments. Each step has to be evaluated before you can go on. This is just one of the other ones, the well-known British Sconnell 7 Pillars of Information Literacy. And I could go on for a very long time about this. Related terms. There are a lot of terms sometimes used synonymously with information literacy. For me, information literacy is an umbrella concept, and all other terms can be considered as components of it. For example, here, information fluency, mastery of information competences, user education, global approach to teach information access to users, library instruction, focuses on library skills, bibliographic instruction, using training on information search and retrieval, information competences, compound skills and goals of information literacy, information skills, focuses on information abilities. In 1995, Harris and Rogers already found 19 related themes. And I think any one of us can find today 19 more. But I think it's always as an aspect, special aspect in information literacy. Although information literacy and media literacy. I participated in 2 expert meetings in Paris, June. It was a teachers training curricula for media and information literacy. And last year in Bangkok, towards media and information literacy indicators. Within UNESCO, information literacy and media literacy are 2 different groups. Those meetings were held with those groups together. When we were talking about those things, we found that we're mainly talking about the same thing. Because I think information literacy is more inclusive, because it includes also other people for gathering information. But if you can't beat them, join them, and since then we are working very well together. There are 3 concepts in the field. The ICT concept. Information literacy refers to the competence to use ICT to retrieve and disseminate information. And the people that are propagating from this, they see ICT only as computer technology. The second, the information resources concept. Information literacy refers to the competence to find and use information independently or with the aid of intermediaries. And the information process concept. Information literacy refers to the process of recognizing information needs, the retrieving, evaluating, use and disseminating of information to acquire or extend knowledge. And you will not be surprised that I prefer the last one because it's the most inclusive one. The excluded are the people which are not able to access information by self because of any kind of disability. That leads me to the following. You can see that we can describe an environment as information rich when there is the possibility to access to all kinds of information resources and channels and memory institutions, and not only for the not disabled. And the opposite we can call poor. An information-rich person is an information-literate person that's able to use the variety of information in an efficient and effective way. She is able to lifelong learning and to be able to develop him herself. and information poor people can't. This gives us 4 theoretical situations. A, an information-rich person in an information-rich environment, and I think most of you consider yourself to be a rich information person in a rich information environment here in Sao Paulo. You are able to use the channels to satisfy your information needs. B is the opposite, an information poor in an information poor environment. This person is not even able to use the few information resources that might be possible. C is an information-rich person in an information-poor environment. Last December, I made a boat trip on the Amazon River, and we visited quite some places where there is no access to whatever, sometimes even no electricity. So that was a week without internet. D, at the last one, is an information poor person in an information-rich environment. That person can learn to become information-rich and use the possibility adequately. And what happens now? I was talking of this information process, more complexity, so the environment becomes richer and richer. Person C and person A are still information rich because they learned how to develop themselves. The gap between B and C and A and B and D is growing and growing. And that's just not because they are doing less, but it's the environment that enforces more knowledge and more skills. How do we become information literate? By learning. Because it doesn't come by itself. In the socialization process. By doing, in formal education and in informal education. Becoming information literate cannot be learned in a distinct subject. It should be integrated in any subject. And that needs coordination between teachers and librarians on all school levels, starting in primary education. I will go into this in more detail at the conference here in Sao Paulo in October the 19th at the Segundo Forum Internacional de Biblioteca Escolar. So far, the information literacy. It's a container concept. It's a dynamic concept. Being information literate is a competence. That means it asks for a critical attitude about what am I doing? What for am I doing this? With what am I doing this? It's about knowledge about the organization and quality of information resources and channels. And it's about knowledge about acquiring access to information. And it's about skills, being able to use the required skills and technology. It's part of lifelong learning. On the UNESCO website, you find those 2 interesting publications. Okay, I come to disabilities. It's an umbrella term. According to the World Health Organization, disabilities is an umbrella term covering impairments, activity limitations, and participation restrictions. An impairment is a problem in body function or structure. An activity limitation is a difficulty encountered by an individual in executing a task or action, while a participation restriction is a problem experienced by an individual in involvement in life situations. Thus, disability is a complex phenomenon reflecting an interaction between features of a person's body and the features of the society in which he or she lives. But nearly it always means more or less dependent on others or tools. A disability may occur during a person's lifetime, like Mara's, or may be present from birth. The World Health Report on Disability. About 15% of the world's population lives with some form of disability, of whom 2 to 4% experience significant disabilities in functioning. The global disability prevalence is higher than previous WHO estimates, which date from the 1970s and suggest a figure of around 10%. This global estimate for disability is on the rise due to the population aging and the rapid spread of chronic diseases, as well as improvements in the methodologies used to measure disabilities. On the website, you find this whole report, which is very interesting. So, disability, an umbrella term. Disability can be physical, cognitive, mental, sensory, emotional, developmental, or some combination of these. In relation to information literacy and access to information, I found this timeline of communication tools. It starts with writing, and it gets on to 2006, with getting more possibilities. And I think we can simplify this in the following periods: communication development, oral, writing, printing, telegraph, telephone, and digital. I would restrict to mainly this. Some disability in Czech, but the relevance is for the access to information. One thing, of course, these disability are no absolute categories, but they are on a sliding scale. As for seeing, nearsighted to complete blind, from bad hearing to completely deaf. Of course, our first communication tool was language. So I think that being deaf was the biggest handicap for accessing information in that period. One of the earliest written records of a signed language occurred in the 5th century of this area, in Plato's, before this area, in Plato's Cratylus, where Socrates says, if we hadn't a voice or a tongue and wanted to express things to one another, wouldn't we try to make signs by moving our hands, head, and the rest of our body, just as dumb people do at present? It seems that groups of deaf people have used signed languages throughout history. And as for hearing, since ear trumpet or ear horn, several hearing aids have been developed now. It's an electroacoustic device. It's typically fixed in or behind a wearer's ear and is designed to amplify and modulate sound for the wearer. As for the blind, their handicap became prevalent when 5,000 years people developed writing. Then being blind was, of course, a very big handicap. And it wasn't until 1829 that the Frenchman Louis Braille developed the Braille system. But those were heavy, thin books, not easy to transport. For most of these handicaps and for most of these people, the impact of digital technology and the computer is enormous. If you can't move well, a visit to a memory institution can be very complicated. But how many beautiful Museum sites, are there not, with visual presentations of the whole interior, with the possibility to have a closer look on details of prints and paintings than people who are physically in that museum. E-accessibility refers to the ease of use of information communication technologies, such as the internet, by people with disabilities. Websites need to be developed, that are developed, so that disabled users can access the information. For example, for people who are blind, websites need to be able to interpret it by programs which read text aloud and describe any visual images. For people who have a low vision, web pages need adjustable sized fonts and sharply contrasting colors. And for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, audio content should be accompanied by text versions of the dialogue. Sign language video can also help make audio content more accessible. And for people with movement disability, internet can be the window to the world. Memory institutions, so also libraries, have an important task in developing this and accessing this. A lot of these requirements are also available. Here's a site that gives access to a variety of assistive technology solutions on very different types of disabilities.